So the title is My Romantic Relation with PowerShell generally and DBATools especially. And romantic relations, they're not all like flowery and pink. It's going to be bumps and turns. So yeah, just having that said. Few words about me. My name is Magnus. I'm a consultant with my own company, Transmocopter SQL AB. If you have a problem, you can give me money and I can make your problems worse or find new problems for you. That's how it works. I have a blog. I rarely write, but actually I published today on tsql.nu. It was part of the tsql Tuesday thingy. I'm on Twitter and, well, there you go. The contents, roughly, I'm going to talk a little bit about PowerShell, just so you get the feeling of how much I actually suck at PowerShell. It was really nice to see Jess, who actually knows PowerShell, present before me. So I know SQL Server pretty well, and I'm kind of new at PowerShell. So I'm going to talk a bit about that. I'm going to show a few things from DBATools. That's it. So why did I make this presentation? Because, well, it's fun to share. If I learn something new and someone else can benefit from it, I'm happy. So that's kind of why. And automation is fun, and DBATools really helps you automate things. So, I mean, it's really worth spending half a day automating a 15-minute manual task, because you think it's a one-off, but you never get a one-off task. You'll have to do it again, and someone asks for it in 2 months, and you forgot how you did it. If you automate things, you keep the scripts, and you can just push a button and redo it again. This is kind of my journey with PowerShell. It's not a straight road, and it's not always pretty, but it helps me do things. And if you show my code to a real PowerShell developers, they will laugh at me. But I'm okay with that, because I can use it to make things work, and I learn as I go along. This is how it started. You know, when someone told me first, you should use PowerShell, it's so powerful and it's amazing. Everything's going to be administered using PowerShell in just a year. This was, I don't know, 10 years ago. But I got some red code. I opened up this ugly prompt, and I just wondered, why would I need something which is much uglier and the syntax is awkward to do what I can do in a command shell? Because that's kind of what I thought it was. I had done some bash programming in Linux and or scripting, I would say, and I didn't understand that it was much more. So it started like this. I was able to change folders and list folder contents, and sometimes even without getting the red text. And then I just pushed it away and said that's not for me. I'll do what I always did. But then I started working with a company that, I mean, they were not PowerShell developers or any good at it, but they use PowerShell quite a lot for stuff like automating replication installation through transactional replication, or they had a software which was installed in something like 40 different infrastructures, and it wasn't any fun to do the ClickOps installations. So they had automated lots of stuff with PowerShell. And when I came there and had to alter or add things to it, I was doing the copy-paste programming and got things to work and really didn't understand why it worked or when it didn't work, why it didn't work. But it got me curious though. And then I found DBATools, and it was about the same time as I was tasked with migrating a database infrastructure from on-premise to Azure. And we were doing it, I had the idea of how to do it. I was thinking about log shipping and had to tweak it a little bit to build my own. And I found DBATools to be super useful to to do those tasks, because we practiced 10, 20 times doing a migration, going back again to on-premise from in their test infrastructure. And it wasn't any fun to do the manual run books. So we automated things with PowerShell and mostly DBATools, to be honest. So before I go further, I just want to say thank you to everyone involved in writing up DBATools. Thanks, Chrissy, for starting this monster, and thanks everyone else for contributing, because it's yeah, you get less from software that you pay a lot for, and this is free stuff. So thank you. What is DBATools then? This is an introductory session. So if you saw Jess do things before me, you saw them in the wrong order. So you have to reverse it. So, DBATools, it's a PowerShell module. It's available on PowerShell Gallery, so you can just download it using install module. You can look at the command reference on dbatools.io/commands. And if you do that, you will see like pages and pages and pages of super useful commands. I'm just going to show a fraction of those. There is so much in there. It's community driven. So what you can do is you can use it. That's a good way to help. You can contribute by writing code, of course. That's one thing. You can report bugs. You can test the development branch. You can suggest features. There are so many ways to contribute. So keep this monster alive and do that. And you can also donate money to it. Now, I mean, it sounds like I'm a salesperson for DBATools, but free stuff still costs money for someone. There is a cost involved in keeping it alive. So if you use DBATools a lot, then please donate some money to them, because it will help the project advance. First demo of DBATools then. I don't have many slides. It's mostly code, actually. I'm going to show a few things you can do with DBATools. But before I do, I need to create a couple of containers, because I'm going to run all my demos on Docker containers, or most of them at least. And I don't need to do Docker pull, but let's create 2 instances. That was actually remove them. So a couple of volumes and a couple of containers. This is not DBATools, but I'm amazed at how fast you can install 2 instances of SQL Server. It's 5 seconds. This is DBATools. When you fiddle with containers, you usually run them, if it's for development purposes, you run them on your local machine, and you get things like this. Port mapping, so port 1402 is mapped to port 1433 in the container. I map port 1401 to 1433. When I connect to them, I would have to use the port number. So what you can do is you can create an alias for that. So you can connect by name instead of using localhost :1401 and 1402. So what you have probably done sometime, if you have worked with SQL Server for a while, is this system32 SQL Manager. This is SQL Server Configuration Manager. And it's just going to start. There it is. So we have some aliases here. And when you create an alias using SQL Server Configuration Manager, first of all, it's ClickOps stuff. And if you give a script to a developer, here is how you create a container, and then you just need to configure your aliases. They're going to do it wrong, and they're going to do it wrong in exactly this way. They're going to go into finding, oh, where is aliases? Okay, I have the client configuration. I'll create the aliases, and then they will forget to create the 64-bit aliases. At least I did it when I had to do it manually every time. So in this little commandlet, new DBA client alias, which I won't run because I already created the aliases. But what it will do for you is do exactly the same thing as you can do in Configuration Manager, only it's going to do it consistently, create both the 32-bit and the 64-bit alias for you. And you can script it as part of the script that you send to your developers to create their container environment. So you can look using get DBA client alias at what you already have created. So I have my aliases here, SQL1, which is a 32-bit alias to localhost, 1401. So looks correct. And if I look further down, I also have the 64-bit architecture. Good. That's the first nice automation thing. So introductory to DBATools. To install it, you use install module DBATools. You can use the repository parameter to tell PowerShell that you want to get the module from PS Gallery. That's going to be the default if you haven't changed anything with repositories. But to be explicit, and then you can scope it to either all users or current user. If you scope it to all users, you need to run it in an elevated prompt. Once you have installed it, you can use update DBATools to get an updated version of this module. And the funny thing with update DBATools is if I do update DBATools and we can explore some parameters, you can. So this is starting out perfectly. Development. If you hit the development switch, you will get the development branch of DBATools instead of getting the release branch. So if you're curious on what are they working on, or you really like the experimental, you know, some people, they're always on the latest build of Windows, the experimental that crashes every time you start your computer. If that's what you want to do with DBATools, then you're welcome to do it using update DBATools. Okay. I'm not going to update either because I already have it installed. So what more can you do with DBATools? You can explore your SQL Server services. If you, like me, manage servers with multiple instances, it's kind of nice to be able to explore what's on there. So if I use get DBA service, I can connect from my computer to a remote computer and check the services on there. Now I don't even have a connection to anywhere else, so I'm gonna look at localhost. Oh, perfect, a stack trace. Why? Error occurred while reading input. Awesome. Let's try again.
That's what we call the demo effect.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, stack traces are cool. If I just run get DBA service without any parameters, I will get all the SQL Server related services. So basically what you will find under services in Configuration Manager. But with the output that you can save the result into an object, you can work with the object and explore things and so on. You can put some filters on. For example, I'm only interested in the database engine service, so I use engine as the parameter for the type parameter, and then I'll just find my named instance test1 and my default instance. Good. And then you can of course pipe the results. I'm, for example, interested in, I mean, this is the visualization of the output of the command. But if I'm interested in what kind of object is this, then I can pipe this to get member and explore what's in there. And I will see that there are a couple of methods, there are a couple of note properties, and there are quite a few properties that are not displayed when I just do get DBA service and look at the output. So this is kind of useful too. If you're you know that for a service, there are certain properties that are not displayed here. Well, that's because they're not automatically displayed, but they're still in the output. So if you can still get them if you save to a variable, for example. You can find the properties and work with them. You can customize the result set. So if I pipe to select object, I can get only the properties that I want. So if I want to explore computer name, service type, service name, description, and I want to see the state, but I want to call it service status, then I can also do a rename of a property using this syntax. So let's restart this PowerShell session. You said something about demo, right? Perfect. But I'm not the only one. I saw Jess also had a problem with F8 not working. So let's try again. Ooh. Come on. It's awesome, isn't it? Let's go old school. Did I just crash my container? That's awesome. Let's check it out. Docker ps-all, is that? So I have SQL1, Docker start SQL1, but I think that's already started, right? Okay, it wasn't. Perfect.
It was showing an uptime, so I would concur that it looked started.
Yeah, it did. I'm super impressed. And my aliases, they're there. I love it. Okay, so let's skip that part of it then. Here we go. Demo gods are not with me. Let's see if I can at least connect to the SQL instance inside it. Oh, I know what I did wrong. It's a Linux container. I can't get to the services that way. I have to use localhost. This works so much better, right?
It looks better.
So now I have the output with only the properties that I selected, and you see that state is now renamed to service status. Awesome. And I can, since I'm a database guy, I can do format table in the end. I just got to move some windows around because I see the miniatures of you other guys where I should see code. So format table will give you this instead, which is much nicer to look at if I have a whole bunch of them. But that's just formatting. Let's do some SQL stuff. I want to create a database on my instance SQL1. So I create a variable, DB name, kind of mimicking that it could be a function that I'm passing a parameter to. So a new DBA database is going to create the database for you. And I'm just using the default for most of the things. The only thing not default is the owner, which will default to myself if I just do create database. But this will do the equivalent of authorization SA to the create database command in T-SQL. So new DBA database. I know what it is. I need to create some credentials first. To be able to log in to a Linux container, Come on, don't be mean to me now. 8. Good. To be able to log into a Linux container, you need to have SQL logins, or you have to do a lot of work. So let's try again with new DBA database, and now I get the result in a couple of seconds. So there, the result I get here is the information about the database that I just created. I see that the recovery model is full because that's the default in my container, and so on and so on. Status normal, and the name is DBA. The reason I create the DBA database, I always do that when I create a new instance, is because that's where I want to store stuff like Ola Hallengren's maintenance solution, those stored procedures. I want to have the Brent Ozar SP Blitz and SP Blitz index, etc. And I want to have Adam Mechanics SP who is active. And since most DBAs want that, they would also the good people behind DBATools, they have created modules to install those solutions. So install DBA maintenance solution will install Ola Hallengren's maintenance solution. DBA first responder kit will install Brent Ozar's first responder kits with SP Blitz, etc. And install DB who is active will install SP who is active for you. And it will go out on the internet and find the scripts for them, so you don't have to download it yourself. And if you use the force flag on these, you will get, or replace existing, you will get the newest version downloaded and installed. So you don't have to download the scripts and do the reinstallation. So that's nice. It's something to do quite often because all of these are updated with new versions of SQL and with new features and so on. So let's install them. I'm going to switch to copy paste because my F8 is not working. So you see the progress. We get a download and an installation. The warnings that you see, they are there because the installation script first installs a procedure that is depending on another procedure, which is installed later. So nothing is really wrong. And then finally, DB who is active. And there you go. So it's a lot faster than getting the scripts together and installing them manually, at least. And kind of nice when you do automated installations of instances. You can add this and you have the nice little script that you always use as a DBA. I want to have a new login as well in my new instance. So I'm creating a password for it. Anything that's password related with DBATools has to be a secure string. So you convert plain text to a secure string. And of course, you shouldn't store the actual password in a source file. You should either get it from a secure repository or, I don't know, enter it as you run the script or something. But this is a demo. So let's first create the password. I'm not sure what's happening with my VS Code, but okay, copy paste. And then I can do new DBA login to create a new login on my instance. So I copy and I paste. And as you see, there are any option that you have with create login are in here. So for example, password policy enforced. I want that to be false because otherwise my password probably wouldn't be accepted even. So now I get the new login, SQL login. If you want to do things in a fancier way, you should have, of course, use splats, which makes the code a bit more readable. So with the splat, you can define the arguments, and then you just send in the splat as the argument to the commandlet. So we can do the same with a login splat. Copy and paste, and we get another new login, my second login. If I would run the exact same thing again, create the login that already exists, I will get a warning. New DBA login, my second login already exists on SQL 1 and force was not specified. This is one of the things that DBATools does a bit differently than kind of best practices as described by Microsoft, because Microsoft would say, well, this should throw an error. But you can define the behavior of DBATools by just adding this enable exception as a parameter equals true. So if I run this again and try to create a login that already exists, it will throw an error on me instead. So enable exception is your friend if you want to do try catch and actually see this as an error. I mean, it's a matter of philosophy. Is it an error that the login that I want to create already exists, or is it not? But the default behavior of DBATools is to throw a warning instead of an error when things like that happen. So let's explore some more fun things. I'm going to set up my instance so that it can back up to Azure. So to do that, first we need to get some credentials going. I have set up a blob storage account in Azure. It's over here and it has one container which is named backups and it's completely empty. So good start. I have also created a shared access signature for my container. I'm going to share the code, but you will not be able to use this because I will destroy the resource group after the demo. But just so I have it handy right now. And then I use this plain text secret and create a blob storage password with convert to secure string. So there we go. And what I want to do, if I want to create, if I want to make it possible for SQL Server to back up to a URL in Azure, I need to create credentials. So that's what, and of course there is a commandlet for it. It's new DBA credential. So new DBA credential, SQL instance, SQL 1, SQL credential cred, which I just created. The name of it should be the URL to the container. Identity should be shared access signature because that's the new way to do URL stuff in SQL Server. Using shared access signature, you don't need to enter username and password when you connect to your container. And then I send in the secure password, which is the secured string made out of this secret. And then if I don't want to have a confirmation prompt, I use force. Now I do that for the instances SQL 1 and SQL 2, but of course you can type it on one row and just enter SQL instance SQL 1, SQL 2. So send in an array of parameters. Or you could do the same thing using a splat where you enter SQL instance, SQL 1 and SQL 2. So let's use the splat version of it. And I still, of course, can't use F8. So I copy and I paste. And basically everything you do with DBATools, if you get something that looks like an object as a return, that's a good sign. You could get a warning and you can also sometimes get nothing back, and that means you didn't get anything created, because DBATools commands, they will always return whatever you asked DBATools to create. So now I got my credentials and I can test them by doing a backup to my to URL. And there is, of course, a commandlet for that, backup DBA database. So I'm going to try to back up my DBA database to Azure. So database DB name, and instead of using a path only, I use an Azure base URL, which is the URL to my container, and the type of the backup is full. So copy and paste. And it shouldn't take too long. Even on a slow connection, because it's a very small database. There we go. And if I go back to my container, I can look it up and see that I got a backup file. Now it's not super handy to get everything to the root folder of things. So I want to have this fancy folder structure, much like Ola Hallengren scripts does when they do the backups. So I can create a string containing the pattern, the path pattern that I want to use. So it will be the URL, it will be the words, server name, instance name, backup type, and database name. Not the actual server name or the actual instance name, just the words, server name, instance name. And then when I run the DBA, backup DBA database command, I have replace in name as a switch, which will replace server name with actual server name, and so on and so on. So let's try this. And it's running. Sorry for flipping the windows. It's just to get the miniatures from the videos out of the way. But we see it's done here. See, we have the instance. I mean, I call the instance SQL1, but really when you create the container, you get something else as the server name unless you explicitly change it. Database DBA type is full. And if I go to my container again, I get a folder which is named SQL1. MS SQL Server is the instance name, full, and the database name DBA, and there I got my backup file. I have to be honest and say I normally don't use DBATools to back up databases because I do that in agent jobs using Ola Hallengren scripts, but it works to do it in DBATools as well if you want to use PowerShell to automate stuff like that. I didn't show you the file path parameter, which works very much the same as the backup path pattern, but file path you can also enter to get the naming as you like it of your backup file. So I have the DB name, the timestamp, the backup type, and then .bak as my name for the actual backup file. Timestamp by default will give you a timestamp which is year, month, day, hour, minute. But if you do transaction log backups every 10 seconds as part of a log shipping, for example, you probably want to set another format for the timestamp. And you can do that using the timestamp format parameter. So let's add that to the backup log command that I'm having here. Copy and paste. And now you see if we go into the container, let's go up a couple of levels, go to the log folder and DBA. You will see that I get a name that is year, month, day, hour, minute, and also the seconds in the end, the 55. if we go down to the full backup where I didn't specify the time format, the seconds are omitted from the file name. So that's kind of important if you do log shipping more than once a minute. If you want to use the backup DBA database for that. Moving on, other useful things. This is a very small, it's not even a demo. I'm just going to show the code because I don't want to bore you with doing an actual installation of SQL Server. But you can use DBATools to install an instance of SQL Server. By using install DBA instance, you get basically the same things that you would do with an unattended installation of SQL Server. From setup.exe, but well, you enter the version, the instance name, the path to your setup installation media, which features do you want to install, which authentication mode do you want, what's the instance path, etc., which port number do you want to run it on, and well, perform volume maintenance tasks will give the service account the perform volume maintenance tasks user rights assignment. So that's also a thing that is kind of useful. I manage, as I don't know if I said, I manage something like 80 development instances. Every developer has their own. When a new developer is employed, it's kind of nice to have a script to just run to create their instance. So this would be the way to do it if you want to do everything in PowerShell. Slightly related, patch servers. Just showed a few things about testing for if you have the right build number, if you're too far behind on updating your servers. There is a commandlet update DBA instance which you can use to install service packs, cumulative updates, just security patches, anything that's in the build reference in DBATools. And the build reference, you find it by using get DBA build reference, which is it gives you information. If you have a build number from an instance, you can enter it and you will see information about that build. So some of this stuff requires an elevated prompt, so I'm just going to start a blue ugly window with administrative privileges. And let's see, I want to run things on my instance test1, which is on the computer T-SQL workstation 1. Major version 2019. The latest SP that I have is RTM because in 2019 there are no service packs anymore. And the latest cumulative update is CU4. And I've downloaded them, put them on this shared folder. And then I create a version string, which is just SQL, the major version, the service pack level, and the CU number. So let's run these, and then I can use get DBA instance property to find out what's the build number of my actual instance that I have. And then using get DBA build reference, I can have a look at some information about the build number that I have in my SQL Server. So let's run this in the elevated prompt. And it's a funny wait, right? There we go. You see this switch, dash update. It's kind of good to have because, I mean, there are new releases of service packs and cumulative updates. And the build reference on DBATools is updated, but it doesn't mean that your local repository is updated. By using dash update switch, you will get the build reference downloaded. So you get all the fun stuff. Now I can look at what get DBA build reference returned. and I see that I have the build 15.0.4033.1. That's CU4. It's described in this knowledge base article, major version, service pack level, and quite importantly, how long is my installation supported? I don't know if they're going to change this behavior, but when there were service packs for SQL Server, when a service pack was released, the previous service pack was supported 1 year. And if you want to be supported, you have basically 1 year to install the service pack. But get DBA build reference will tell you how long your current installation is supported, or a certain build number, how long it's supported. So now we can use update DBA instance, because now I found out what my current build is, and I built some parameters to define which build I actually want. So I'm going to run this first with a what if switch. And the what if switch, it is what it is. It tells you what would the command do if it was running, but don't do it. Just tell me what it will do. And this one won't do anything. And you could think, that might be a mistake. Why isn't it doing anything? But if my instance is already on the build number that I want it to be on, then this command won't do anything. So if you do this to automate patching of all your infrastructure, it will just look at every instance and see, okay, this is already up to date, this is up to date, oh, here is an instance that I need to update. So you don't need to know beforehand what build number you have on every instance. You can just run update DBA instance and give the command the desired version by using version string. And I kind of like that when I'm tasked with installing cumulative updates on service pack on hundreds of instances. And what's cool is if you're on the RTM version of a SQL Server installation, and there is up to service pack 4 released and a couple of cumulative updates afterwards, this command will install both the service pack and the cumulative updates for you. So just one command. You can even add the switch to it to tell it to restart a machine when it's done. I usually don't want to restart my machines unattended, but it's possible to do it. If I try this without the what if switch, as I told you, my instance is already up to date. Cumulative update 4 is the latest for 2019, and that's what I had installed, so it won't do anything. And I unfortunately don't have an instance with which is not patched, but it wouldn't be any fun to watch anyway. The reason I do this on a local host instance instead of my containers is because when you patch containers, you don't actually patch them. You just destroy the container and create a new one with the latest build or the build that you want. And just throw it onto your storage and it will pick up the databases and upgrade them. Last demo. It's about migration. We're going to start looking at the command which is named start DBA migration. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's one command to rule them all. You can use it to migrate more or less everything. I think service master key can't be migrated using DBA migration, and I don't think certificates will be migrated, but the rest, endpoints, everything, you name it, it's going to be migrated. Or you can choose to exclude some of the things in the migration. So for example, if you don't want to migrate the databases, but all the rest of the settings and logins and jobs and stuff, you can do it with start DBA migration and then just add exclude databases. But I'm going to run this with a what if switch just to show you how much is done in this one command. And a few of the things won't work because I'm running it against the Linux containers, but most of the stuff will work regardless. And really the things you see on screen is all the steps that if you do a manual migration, you should consider all of these things. So if you create a manual runbook to do a migration, these are the steps you should look at. Migrate mail, DB mail settings, logins, jobs, all the SP configure stuff. And it's a bit more fun to do it this way. Just one script, run it, and there are a few things missing in there, but I'd rather do 4 manual steps than do 100 manual steps. So that's alerts and so on. I'll just leave it running while we look at the next thing, because I'm not going to do a full migration this way, but I'm going to do a few migration steps, more in a manual fashion. So I'm going to copy logins first. So copy DBA login, it's going to copy all my Windows logins and all my SQL logins. And the SQL logins are going to be copied with the correct SID and the password, of course. Correct SID is quite important because otherwise you'll end up with the user databases having another SID than the login SID and you get a mismatch. So copy DBA login from instance SQL 1 to SQL 2. And my computer just needs to think a little bit. Here you see that you have 2 successful copies. One is skipped, and then in the notes you will see it's skipped because it already exists on the destination. And then you have 2 logins not migrated because they're local to the machine. So I mean, it wouldn't make sense to migrate a Windows login from one machine to another if it's local to the machine I'm migrating from, because the actual Windows account doesn't exist. And then I'm going to migrate some agent jobs. So copy DBA agent job. This is not going to show much output because I haven't created any jobs, but it's a typical command that you would want to run when you do migrations. And this switch in the end, disable on destination, is pretty handy. Because normally if you do all the migration except the databases beforehand, you don't want the jobs running in the destination machine. So then you can disable on destination. You can also use disable on source. If you first migrate the databases and then you actually want to start using the new machine, you can do disable on source, and that will enable on destination and disable the jobs on the source system. Now what we're going to do, we're going to set up some kind of home-cooked log shipping as part of a migration scenario.
Can I just interrupt you with a quick question before you get to that?
Yeah, sure.
So it's actually not my question, but Damo's question. But how will the migration affect transaction replication if this is done with a start DBA migration?
I haven't tested, but I'm pretty sure it will not migrate replication. I base that on having tried to migrate servers with replication, at least not if it's a publisher. I'm almost 100% certain the replication won't work afterwards because it's connected to the instance name so much inside the distributor.
I mean, it is hard to keep replication working on the same instance. So how should it ever work when you migrate it? But this is just me as a lover of replication speaking. And Damu's got a second question while we're at it.
Yep.
Can you use migration to do an in-place upgrade? So basically use the start DBA migration from an older SQL version to upgrade to a new one, or does it have to be a one-by-one migration first and then you do an upgrade?
You can do it to another version, and then I mean, your databases will be upgraded as you migrate them.
All right, cool.
But I must say I'm not a fan of doing the migration of the actual databases. with this tool. I'd rather have everything else but the databases, and then I take the databases afterwards, because then I can prepare and do my checks on the new instance without copying all the data over there.
Being prepared, that's kind of, I don't know, it's not very brave.
No, I'm a coward.
I just have to say that. So. All right, thank you.
So for the log shipping, this is from, it's not the actual code that we did run for migration, but I was tasked with migrating from on-premise to Azure, huge infrastructure, lots of databases and lots of transactions ongoing. We were thinking about mirroring. It was standard edition, so we couldn't do asynchronous mirroring or asynchronous availability groups. So we started looking at log shipping, but normal log shipping requires a shared folder, UNC path. And there was no way that the network guys would allow the Azure instance to connect to a path in the data center. So we started looking at doing our own log shipping, but using an Azure storage account to put the backups on, much like we did with the backup the URL example. So I built a little solution, and this is kind of a light version of that. It starts with having a database to store some metadata about the log shipping. So we'll start with that. I'm creating it on SQL 2, which will be my target instance in this scenario. So I call it log shipping metadata. In there, I create a table, and I do this with SQL, but I execute the SQL with invoke DBA query, which is also a DBATools command. If you haven't understood by now, if the name of a commandlet is a verb dash and then DBA something, it's part of DBATools. So SQL instance SQL 2, etc. I'm creating the table log shipping watermarks. It's going to contain the database name. It's going to contain the last name or the path to the last full backup that has been restored onto SQL 2. And it's going to contain the LSN number of the last transaction log that LSN is log sequence number. And then finally, I insert one row into this table, which will be my database DBA. I put null as the last full backup that I restored because I haven't done it yet. And I put 0 as the log shipping watermark, the last LSN. So let's run these, just preparation steps. My son is calling me, excellent timing. So let's not answer that right now.
Or answer it for all of us to hear it.
I haven't asked him first if he wants to be online. So to find out what I need to do to start my log shipping is I need to restore the latest full backup from SQL 1 to SQL 2. And I can find out what that backup is by using get DBA DB backup history against SQL 1 instance for the database DBA, and with the switch last full. It will give me the last full backup. Hopefully there is one. And I'm looking at the full name property of the object that getDBA backup history returns. And that's going to be an array, because when you back up, you can back up to multiple files. And I know that I backed up to just one file, so I'm going to use the first item in that array. So that's my backup path. We can explore it just to see that it actually contains something. Looks good. And then I will restore it onto SQL 2 with restore DBA database. And since I want to restore transaction log backups after this, I will do it with no recovery. With replace is not necessary because I don't have it there, but if I have one and I want to restart my log shipping, I can use with replace to just overwrite the existing one on SQL 2. So let's run the restore. And now DBATools is telling SQL Server to go out to Azure and find my backup file and restore it. Yay, there it is. And I get some information on here. For example, which SQL command was used to do the restore. Now I want to update my the table log shipping watermarks to tell it that I actually did do the full restore. So I mean, if you want to do this as a proper log shipping installation or log shipping script, you should do checking, of course. Don't do the restore if it's already restored and so on. But at least I want to update the metadata. So I do that with invoke DBA query, and I send in some parameters because you don't want to, even if I'm in full control of all the code, I don't want to do concatenation to build up a dynamic SQL string. Instead, I want to parameterize the query, and invoke DBA query supports that. So now my table is updated and I can start the actual log shipping. So what I will first do, I will go into my SQL instance SQL 2, look in the log shipping watermarks table to get the last LSN for my database DBA, which is going to be 0 so far, but that's my starting point. And we can have a look. What did it return? It returned a 0. Good. And then I will run a for each loop to get the DB backup history from SQL 1 for transaction log backups in the DBA database. With the last LSN switch, I tell DBATools that I'm only interested in the backup history for transaction logs after the last log sequence number that I already restored. In this first scenario, it's going to be 0. And then when I update my database table, it's going to increase or increment so that I will only try to restore the transaction log backups that are actually new since my last restore. And I want to sort the output by the start date or start time property of the backup history object that I get back from this. Then I convert the LSN to an int 64 because that's a big int. I do some debugging. If I would be a proper PowerShell developer, I would create a function with command-let bindings, and then I can add a verbose switch and then just do the verbose output. But I didn't. So I output the LSN. I look up the backup path in this DB backup history commandlet. I output that as well, so we see what's going on. And then I do a restore. And when I do the restore, really the continue switch is the magic here because that will keep the database in no recovery mode. When I do the transaction log restore, to be honest, I don't think I need with replace or no recovery, but since I kind of changed this demo late last night and I got it to not work and then finally it worked, I didn't want to touch it. So, but I think you can just skip these and just keep continuing there. And then finally, I use invoke DBA query to update my log shipping watermarks to set the last log sequence number that I restored. So let's run this little loop. Copy and paste.
So while this is running, we got another question from Jay.
Yeah.
And the question would be, if the file system on the target is different from the source, so backing up from one file system, restoring to another file system, does that affect or change the restore DBA database commandlet? So do you have to explicitly specify any file moves in this case? Like, for example, you're restoring from Windows, restoring to a Linux machine, where obviously file paths and everything is slightly different, to say the least.
If you look at the restore DBA database command, I don't have auto completion, but there are parameters for data destination directory and log destination directory, which you can enter, and then you will get everything in there. You could do it file by file as well. If you have multiple file groups and you want to store them on different storage, but basically the most basic would be destination data directory and destination log directory.
Right,
those two parameters will help you.
I've put an example in the chat of how you could do that.
Ah, perfect. Thanks, Rob.
Nobody likes show off, Rob. So needy, so needy.
So let's do some more transaction log backups, because in a real log shipping scenario, you would have backups running continuously. So I will run a couple more, actually 4 of them. Copy and paste. And we're going to wait a little while it's running. It's kind of fun when you do presentations and you have live streaming going on. Everything is like, it takes 5 times as long as usual. It's always good to make the presenter a bit nervous.
You're welcome.
Almost done now. So now I got 4 more, and I can run my for each loop again, starting with getting the last LSM from the database. And what you would typically do is save this little script into a file or create a module of it even, and then have your SQL agent job run it continuously. And you do the backups, of course, continuously on the other end. That way, those 2 machines, they don't, in this scenario, I have SQL 2 connect to SQL 1 to get the DB backup history. If you don't want to have that connection between the instances because they're on different networks and you have evil network admins who won't allow you to do it, instead of connecting to the machine, you can let SQL 1 itself publish its backup history. As soon as it takes a backup, it could publish that to, I mean, a file or something in Azure Blob Storage. Or you could even just go into the container and enumerate the files. If you have named them consistently, you can enumerate them and start with just to get all the files whose file name are larger than the file name I last restored, and it will work fine as well. So that's log shipping. I'm gonna push a version of this code that actually works instead of this version that I already did push, which doesn't work, to my GitHub repo. So if you want to just have a look at these scripts, you are welcome to just download them from github.com. And I never remember the, is it just my name here? Yeah, github.com/transmocopter/presentations. There you find, in I love DBA tools, there is going to be a GroupBy folder where you can find scripts that actually works. That was it. I might have a couple of famous last words in the PowerPoint. Thank you, GroupBy, for having me. And thank you even more to all the contributors of DBATools. Jess, who was before me, is one of them. Rob, who is coming after me, is another one. There are tons of people who contributed to DBATools, and it's really helped me with automating really boring tasks. You know, if automation, it replaces all your random mistakes with consistent errors, which is kind of nice. Because then you can fix those errors once and run your automation scripts, and things will work for you. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Magnus.
Do you have any more fun questions, Ben?
So there is no questions right now, but from my experience, they sometimes drop in a little late. So let me take that opportunity. First of all, thank you very much for that presentation.
Thank you.
Also, what you said, thank you, GroupBy. Thank you, DBATools. And maybe something also to point out again, keep in mind everything the people at DBATools and the people at DBATools, that are actually so many people, but there are a few of them that are even much more than all the others, which does not mean that the others are less appreciated. You can actually support these people by just sponsoring them a little bit on GitHub with a very minimum, because keep in mind, these people need also to buy and support their hardware and tools and everything to keep this developing. So don't just think about, well, why would I pay them for an open source thing? You actually also paying them for resources, and every little bit helps. So just to point that out again.
I'm kind of happy if they can pay rent and eat food as well. So I mean,
I totally
if it's
agree.
used to actually pay someone to do it, I'm happy with that too.
So. Well, we're totally on the same page here. But even if you say, well, this is kind of what people are doing in their free time, at least consider all the extra expenses people are putting into open source, because open source may be free for you to use, just like virtual events are. They are not free for those actually producing those tools, running those events. And so again, thank you, DBATools. Thank you, GroupBy. Thank you, Magnus.